I'm Jack Osborne, and you're listening.
This is Mr. Hello, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
That's right, everybody. Welcome back to another incredible episode. I know you heard some background noises and my co-host and guest talking in the back over the music, but that's okay because on this end, they can't hear it. Nonetheless, you are listening to, as you heard from our good friends, Jack Osborne, Nassim Harriman, Richard Hoagland, and the Art Bell. You are listening to Dr. J Radio Live. I am your humble host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels on the Coast to Coast PM radio network. And don't forget that we also broadcast in late night in the Midlands, as well as PSN network, and in the United Kingdom, D-Program Radio Network, whose names I will thank later on, probably after the first break. Now, I want to say, coming at you straight from Los Angeles, all the way to Miami, New York to Seattle, everything in between, Honolulu to London, Melbourne, South Korea, Scandinavia, you name it. This is truly an international show. As I told you already, my name is Dr. J. My co-host live in London, where it happens to be 3 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, is Johnny Webb. And on the East Coast, where my guest is, and also webmaster, who's done a lot of work and continues to do a lot of work behind the scenes, it is 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And of course, where I am sitting now, it is 7 p.m. Pacific Time, still looking at the sunlight. Now, right before we begin the show, let me just say to everybody that tomorrow we have to remember that it is the 47-year anniversary of Apollo 11. Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong landing from the lunar module onto the moon, placing the flag, which some people think was sort of the wrong thing to do. Rather than placing a flag of the Earth, placed a flag of the United States to show that the U.S. got there first, but some people interpret it the wrong way, that the U.S. owns the moon, which is definitely not true. Because remember, everybody on this planet is literally separated by 7 degrees at most. So, for instance, I can be related, or my cousin could be related to someone in China, who could be related to someone in New Zealand, who could be related to the Queen of England, who could be related back to the Bush family, and so on and so forth. We are all brothers and sisters. That is a very major theme that nobody must forget. Now, let's get on with tonight's fabulous show. Our guest, this is a very, very rare interview. He is so down to earth, and I am very humbled to call him a friend and honored to have him on the show yet again. He's only done, a handful of interviews over the last 10 years, and to have him on twice is awesome. And some of the other interviews he's done are with people that I know very well, including Erica Lukes, who heads, if I'm not mistaken, is either the head of the Utah MUFON network or just the Salt Lake City. Nonetheless, she's a fantastic, pretty lady who is married, so I can't say anything more than that. But nonetheless, let's get to Mr. Christopher Bledsoe Sr. Chris, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing fine, Dr. J. Thank you for having me.
Like I said, thank you for joining us tonight. Again, it's truly an honor to have you back on the show. It's rare that we have someone who has been through as much as you have, but does not ask for publicity, turns down movie deals, turns down books, and doesn't seek out interviews. This goes to show me, because I've been studying psychology as a byproduct, not to mention what you learn from law school and all that stuff. I got a minor in it when I got my bachelor's. that this goes to show that you really don't care about the money coming in, or you're not one of those people who is hoaxing an incident because you just want the truth to get out there. And might I say this, Jim Sparks, author of The Keepers, a very influential man in the contactee abductee movement, has been radically changed for the positive ever since he has been taken. And what he said was that people who he has seen during the takings or abductions, or now he calls them contacts, the mass takings, that he will see on the street will go from being, their normal 9 to 5 people, come home, drink a few beers, argue with their wife, go to sleep, start the day over again, to starting to do something positive for work, and also subconsciously assigned a mission. So, for instance, his mission is to save the rainforests and to calm the people down after disclosure. So this is what I was going to say. I believe from all the experiences you have, and should I say continue to have, you are a chosen one. Would you agree with that?
Well, that's kind of hard to I don't like that word. I don't like to make it about me, because it's not about me.
It's about humanity, right?
Right. It's all about just what you were saying with Jim Sparks. It's about the environment. It's about the earth. It's about this world's in trouble, and we're not even realizing it. I had a very good friend of mine that gave me some data this past weekend that there's 65.8 million people displaced because of war, 23 million because of weather, and the trend's going upward. So there's a real problem happening, and the world is afraid. People are afraid, and people are looking answers, and so it's not about one person. It's not about me. It's not about being popular. It's about mankind. It's about an awakening that needs to happen. We've got to come out of all this and move forward, or I really don't know.
I'm glad you mentioned the word awakening, because humanity is, like you said, in we're not just a primitive culture, right? We're very violent. You look at all these wars fought all over. Look at the assassinations of cops. Now, cops get killed by guns every year, but from January 1st to July, right now, 31 cops have been assassinated in the United States. That is up 73% from last year, but this only includes 7 months worth of data. Not even 7 months. So that's a very scary thing, or should I say almost 7 months at this point when you get to the end of the month. But nonetheless, what we need is a true awakening. And when you have people such as yourself who are humble, down to earth, friendly, and are not shooting at orbs, shooting at craft, trying to kill beings because of fear, you are embracing them. That's what everybody needs to do. So for those people who may have missed the first interview or have not listened to it from our archives, especially since now we have a global audience, even though it was a global before, now we are truly global with that many more listeners, terrestrial radio, and the different networks. Let's just give a quick background on what happened when you first realized, because I think, and we talked about this previously, that this has been going on not just since your childhood, probably since before you were even born, to your parents, grandparents, and maybe beyond. But let's go back to the time when you first noticed something was happening to you, when you first were lured out into the forest and saw the glass being, before we get to what's happening now.
Well, it was in January of 2007, January the 8th. that I took my son and 3 guys fishing after a month-long job out of town, and to really to have meaning here, you'd have to understand where I came from. I was a builder, building 100 homes a year, 4 children, all small. My business was suffering because I got very sick, and it started out in the 80s with this, what they called IBS, and it got worse and worse and worse and turned into Crohn's disease.
Ooh,
and,
sorry.
And then in 2004, I experienced, well, actually in 03 and 04, there were 2 years there I couldn't go to work. And my wife, poor thing, was trying to run this company. And it was just an awful situation. And it ended up causing me a near-death experience. I was over-medicated by a doctor that actually killed himself. He overdosed on drugs.
Ouch.
And he put 110 people in the hospital, and I was one of them. And so that really knocked the wind out of my sails. It caused my wife to have to sell the company while I was in the hospital, and that deal didn't work out too good. So after all the dust settled, here I am, a father that's very sick. I just come out of the hospital with this near-death experience. Rose up out from under. I had a sheet over my head in this room, and my wife was in there and crying, and I come up to the ceiling, and I could see her, and saw these 3 men walk in, and one doctor said, she called the other doctor's name, and I recognized it. I heard it, and I told everyone after I was back back in my body, I guess you would say, the doctor's name. So that was something, an eye-opener. But long story short, I was not a very happy person. I was sick. I couldn't work.
Not
2
to
years
mention
goes by.
the financial loss, right?
Right. I had a $20 million a year business, 18 to 20 million annual revenue. So it was a big tiger, the whole, big tiger by the tail, my father would call it. But long story short, my doctor said, you got to sell out, you got to quit, you're going to die. So we did that. 2 years of recuperating. I sold my house, moved next door to my father. He talked me into going to the coast and trying to do a little something. We did this 4-month-long job. We got over, and the guys wanted to celebrate. So we go fishing down on the banks of the Cape Fear River. Just a little narrow river. It's not very deep, 10, 12 foot deep, and about 75 yards wide. Down in a valley, way down, just a beautiful place. And we got there about 2:30 in the day, got everybody, my son and these 3 grown men that they were leaders of the crews that worked on this house, the good guys. They were having fun. And so I wasn't fishing, didn't want to. Wasn't letting them know what I was thinking, but I wasn't very happy where life was. So I left walking and was crying out to whoever's up there in that big sky, help me, please help me. Why? And I feel bad. I can't work. How am I going to support my children? And I was crying out to whoever was up there, God, and I was at the end of my rope, Dr. J. And as I walked up this path through the forest to this field, I told these guys I'm going to go up this field just before dark. It was 10 after 5. In January, it gets dark 5:30 roughly. So I start up this path. When I get up there, they were waiting on me. I guess they heard me. When I come to the top of the hill, there's these 2 orange craft sitting across this big field, cornfield, just above the trees. And I'm a commercial rated pilot. Never flew for an airline, but I have the rating nonetheless, and multi-engine to add to that. And I run charters and stuff what they would call the mail hauls and building time to get to an airline. But long story short, what I was seeing was something was out of this world, and I knew it.
Literally.
So I
and figuratively.
literally,
Yeah.
yes. So I'm going up this muddy road, up this long muddy road to the top of the hill, and the field is up at the top of the hill. Can't see the field till I get up this hill. Well, as I get near the top, I see this one thing that I thought was the sun to start with, because I'm watching the ground, walking my steps just in this muddy, terrible muddy road. And when I got a little closer to the top, my field of vision widened, and there were two of them there. And I thought, oh, my God, I knew right then it wasn't the sun, because they look like the sun when it's setting late in the evening, when you can look at it and it hurt your eyes. And just like that, if you can imagine two of those, but I could see fire swirling around these objects like a clockwise motion, and flames were shooting off the tips of the fire. It was incredible, and they were like egg-shaped and big as a school bus, long, but football-shaped or egg-shaped, and orange, bright, brilliant, the color of the sun. So I ducked behind this, still using the hill in front of me to hide, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is that? I got the chills real bad, I'm scared. And so I turned my body, pointed it down the hill in the motion to run. I'm running. I'm scared. I look back behind me and pop my head back up above the hill to see if they're still there. All in the same motion to run. And as soon as I did, the sky opens up and out shoots a third object. I mean, it looked like a hole opens up and another sun flies out. And I knew they saw me. Without a doubt, I knew they saw me. So in my mind, I took off running down the hill. And remember, I went up there at 10 after 5, and this is a 15, 20-minute walk. It took me 15 minutes to get up there because, and I'm making this very short, I could spend hours on this.
Exactly. I know we were saying this before the show. We can probably do, I think even if we did 1,000 hours, literally 2 hours, 5 days a week for a couple years, I still don't think I'd get enough information out of you. So you're absolutely right.
And so I run back down the hill, and I had no flashlight. I didn't realize how dark it was, but I'm having a hard time seeing. I'm still pumped from seeing these craft, these eggs. I didn't see a flying saucer. I didn't see anything metal. I saw these fiery, egg-shaped fireballs, and they're not very far away, right above the tree. And when I get to the fire, there's not fishing anymore. These 3 grown men are standing there by the fire. And I'm trotting up, and I'm like, you guys won't believe what I just saw. And they're like, where in the world have you been? I'm like, I look back and pointed up as I'm jogging to them, just up the hill, and I'm coming towards them, still 20 feet away. And they're very solemn looking and like, man, we've been looking at you all night. And I said, come on, I just was up at the hill, just 20 minutes. I've only been gone 15, 20 minutes. And they're like, look at your clock. And now it's going on 11 o'clock.
So you have missing time, essentially.
Yeah.
What seems to you, exactly, 4.5 hours is gone, but in your mind, it seems like 20 minutes or, you just can't account for that time. I don't want to interrupt your story. I want to continue on that, but we already have an international question, and because they're awake so late, or should I say early in the morning in the next day, where it is the night of the 20th, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Johnny to ask it. Go ahead, Johnny.
Okay. Well, this one's coming on Facebook from Rupert in Ayrshire in Scotland, and he asks, what can you tell us exactly your role was in the interactive experience, playing a role in a timed event yet to come, is the question.
Well, I think the role is ever evolving. And it's about, I can tell you this, after this thing, I've never had another symptom of Crohn's disease. It went away that night. I've never had another bit of medication. It's been 10 years. I suffered with it for 17 years, and it's been 10 years free of any kind of symptoms. So, but it's still evolving. We're still being visited, and it's well known. I have lots of people that have seen it with me. I have videos of it. I have audio of them. I have photos, and I have witnesses, and some very prominent folks as well that have seen it. So I think the role is to help people awaken that it's real.
Exactly.
It's time for these folks to quit being skeptics. In fact, the skeptics are starting to hide because the truth's coming. When Mrs. Clinton said, we're going to release the documents, well, that's a key indicator for people that there is something out there. There is something really going on. So the skeptics are starting to hide. So because they're going to be proven wrong.
And they're running out of excuses, as science evolves. I hate to cut you off again, but we have a live caller, area code 801. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, Dr. J. Nathan, calling from Utah. I haven't talked to you for, I don't know, since last time I heard you on Third Phase Moon, which was a long time ago.
Pleasure to hear from you, Nate. What you got?
Good. Well, I'm a contactee as well, so I would agree with them 100%. I think you won't get disclosure or complete disclosure from the government, but it's from the people that have these experiences, and I would encourage all of them to come out and talk out live. I have been in contact with actually one of your interviewees, Ward, and a few other interesting people lately. Ward,
well yes, I've interviewed him as well, and he sent me footage of what happened in his home.
I've been trying to get in contact with him, and I've been sending him emails, and he's been responding back. But I think it's important for people that have contact experience to come together and kind of, express each other's encounters, and it helps each other in that transition period. Because there's, for instance, like myself, I've had contact since the age of 2, and I'm 36 years old now, and it's continuing throughout my life. But it's a hard, difficult transition for most people that are new to this experience, and they feel fear. And this whole contact experience, for me at least, speaking for myself, has been in a positive reinforcement and growing. I mean, there's a lot of things that has happened throughout my life, and I'm sure throughout others, but it's hard to have that channel to express what has happened in someone's life with an encounter like that, because it is life-altering and changing. And, what you guys were talking about, losing time, well, the concept of time completely is eliminated within a contact experience. What may seem like 5 minutes can be 5 hours or longer from personal experience. And, what I'd just like to share out is, that people, you're going to get ridiculed, but you know what? If you know within inside yourself what is true that you've experienced, it's important to share that with others. Where we're at in our stage, people are becoming more accepted to this, and I think it's important that we share that message, because from what I'm understanding through my personal experience, it's helped me to grow more so myself and to give more to others in a whole bunch of aspects of my life. And, I wasn't born in a religious family. However, I became baptized as a Christian. Now, has that steered me away from, say, that particular religion? No, absolutely not. It's helped me get a greater understanding of more in this reality than people really realize.
Nathan, let me say this to you, and then I want to ask you if you have a question for Mr. Bledsoe. First of all, a lot of people who are taken or have contacts start with fear, but eventually evolve to awakening and happiness, just as Mr. Sparks, Jim Sparks, has said. And they become aware of some sort of subconscious mission they're supposed to have. Now, during disclosure and post-disclosure. So I just wanted to make that out there from all the interviews that I've conducted, and that's in the 4 digits. And you're talking 32 years of solid research, 5 years of radio, and not to mention the documentaries I've made. I made 2 on Dr. Roger Lear, 1 on people who have been taken, and it all fits the same pattern in the sense that they all started with fear. They wanted it to go away, but then they embraced it once they realized, wait a minute, we're not being harmed. Anyhow, Nathan, do you have anything you'd like to ask Mr. Bledsoe?
Yeah, Mr. Bledsoe, I mean, from your experience, has it been more positive, or do you feel that the particular source that is in contact with you tends to mislead you?
Well, I can tell you this. When the investigators came in early '08, it was a year before I would talk about it because, people were making fun, and it was just a long story. But I reported it 10 months later, and MUFON came, and it was from that day I told them straight up, I believe that they were some sort of divine being, angelic beings. I mean, even though they're strange looking, I was praying, Lord God, whoever's up there.
You brought up an interesting...
Well, doesn't the Bible actually say that? It talks about beings with wings and 4 faces, but they're angels? Right?
Right. They're strange-looking beings, and all I can say, I was asking for help, and I got it. And it's been a blessing for this family. It's been a blessing for me, and it goes deeper because in 2012, I had hid out. I was hiding out for 5 years. I wouldn't talk about it because of ridicule.
Can I ask you one more question? Would that be okay? When was your first initial contact experience? Was it as a child or as you grew up?
Well, actually, Nathan, let me say that's actually 2 questions, because one is, when did the first encounter happen? The second would be, when does the first encounter happen that he's aware of?
Right. And I can answer that. I can answer that for you. Because of being so sick and so busy and never even thought about a UFO all my life, or even paranormal, running this business, I was totally detached from even television. But I have told this for 44 years. I'm 54 years old. When I was 10 years old, I was turned 10 on October 15. And on New Year's Day, I was bird hunting at 10 years old with my first cousin. He was 9, and my neighbor 9. Now, I'm a country boy. I was raised in a little mobile home on a farm out in the woods, and I shot my first deer at 7. I've killed a 660-pound black bear that made Boone and Crockett, and I'm sad to say I ever did any of that. I don't hunt anymore and all. But at 10 years old, I was shot point blank from 6 foot away. I have a scar on my left shoulder in line with my heart as big as an orange. And it blew me end over end down in the pile of bushes, and I'm bleeding, and I feel the blood just oozing out of my body, and I'm laying face down, and I hear my first cousin crying, and my neighbor, who's going to get help? You go get help. We were 2 miles from anywhere in the woods. And I woke up after surgery. In those days, they didn't have MRI machines and all. So I was on this cold metal table, and they were rolling me over doing x-rays. I'm still on anesthesia. They're trying to find more lead, and I still have 17 pieces in my chest around you can see it coming out on the front side. But my memory was of being on board something. I always told my wife it was like I felt like I was surfing on a surfboard. And when the movie Fantastic Four came out and Silver Surfer, I was like, oh my God, that was it. But there was something around me. I could bump the wall in front. I could step and feel it. But you couldn't see it. It was that clear. And I was flying away from Earth. I could see Earth getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's been all my life.
Which means that you were traveling away from the Earth in a craft that had invisible walls that you could see out from. Anyway, go ahead, Nathan.
What I was going to say is, since you've been aboard a craft and I have, everything feels organic, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure does. Feels alive.
Yeah, the craft is alive. Not, there's a lot to it. I wish people could. Go ahead.
Let me add to that how I can add to what you just said. This past Christmas, I have a lot of people that want to come visit, and I visit a lot of groups of folks. I don't go out on TV. I don't try to make anything out of this, but I try to help folks that, are in need the best I can, people that are sick, any way I can help someone. So this particular friend comes for 3 days, and he has an experience with me, and he's very well known, I have to say. Very well known. Dr. John Alexander, I can tell you. And he experienced something with me that he will tell you if you ask him about. I could feel it, though. I knew it was near because of being on the craft before, several times, many times. This feeling when I get near it begins to feel like adrenaline, you might say, with euphoria added into it.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because for me, with that type of encounter, would you agree with me that you feel every single emotion physically during that particular moment with that experience?
Yeah, in fact, I've been allowed to fly this thing, and just to there's a pedestal that I've drawn it, like a pedestal with this half of basketball black color that I was place my hand on, and it would turn violet in color, and then it would light up. The whole craft would come alive. But that connection to that, I can feel it when it gets near me. I don't have to see it. It can be above me. It can be up in the sky. But I tend to know it when it's there, and I've proven that. So, yeah.
I can agree with you 100% with that. I do feel a lot of electrical current through my body when I have entities or craft in the vicinity where I'm at. So I'm very in tune with more than just visual perception, because you have to understand that there's so much more than just seeing it visually. It's understanding what you're hearing, you're feeling. Yeah, feeling is a big part of it. Now, Dr. J, I'll let you continue the show.
Yeah.
But,
Nathan, by all means, you could stay on if you want. We just have a lot more questions from callers, not to myself. Just mute out if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. What I was going to let you know is I gave Blake Cousins my contact information to you actually yesterday, because I don't know how to get in contact with you, but I'd also like to share my story with you, because I believe it's important for people.
We'll definitely talk after the show. I got your number, so I will definitely reach out to you if that's okay. Now, let me ask this question before I turn it over to the European questions and beyond that Johnny's been sitting on from the different Facebooks. Okay, this is from, what do you know? Another John. John in Brownsville, Texas, wants to know about the ET that Mr. Bledsoe met in the woods. I said Mr. Bledsoe. It's written as he, but nonetheless, I want to be more polite.
Just call me Chris.
Yeah.
Well, there are two different beings involved in that incident. In fact, what's real funny is when they did this show, Discovery did a show on this thing called the Seville Incident. And during my regression, they placed on there the line, an hour and a half regression. They put on the television that I said they're their children, these little ones. They're their children. They let them out to play. Well, a lot of people got a big laugh at that, I'm sure. And I've been poked at fun for that for 10 years now. But some very important people came to me and said, we'd like to talk about those children. So, and that's as far as I'll go with that. But there were these tiny little beings, big, skinny and thin, 3 feet tall at the most, maybe shorter, childlike. They act childlike. They have these. They're able to, I guess, through technology. I don't understand it. I'd leave that to the experts. But they glow. They can go invisible. They wear these goggles that look like swimmer's goggles that are glowing red, and it's been suggested that they can see. They use those to see in different spectrums. But I believe it to be their parents that are the 7-8 foot ones. They tend to be, and the little ones, I describe them as glassy-like in appearance. But I think it's whatever technology they use makes them shiny, and it looks like, I can't describe it. A good friend, Doug Auld, is a great painter, has been a friend and has tried to paint this glowing figure, and it was a major job for him to figure that out, and he did. But even the larger ones, they had blue eyes, and they appeared to be bluish and white color. Sometimes they appear greenish white color, bluish green color. And I don't know if it's what they're wearing or what technology they use. I don't know. I just know they have blue eyes. The little ones wear goggles. They come together. Or maybe the little ones are scouts. I call them children. And that's what I really believe they are. But they're benevolent. They came because I was praying. I'm 100% sure of that. They took care of this problem.
They responded to your
Crohn's.
prayer, right?
Yes. That's why they came. And that's why I told Muflon I believe they were angelic beings, because I was praying. I prayed and I cried harder out than any thing I could ever do in my life. Actually, in earnest, I was on my knees. God, help me. I want to die, but I don't want to lose my family and children. How am I going to support them? I can't even work, and this is where I was. And I got up from there and I walked up that hill, and there they were waiting on me. And 4.5 hours later, they brought me back. And I didn't realize it at that time, but I was never sick from that day forward.
And so that means they cured your Crohn's. Now, real quick, we actually have a comment here. The ones that you call the children, the little ones, here's a comment. It says Cherokee, the Cherokee Indians, or they're not Indians. They're obviously Native Americans.
Right.
Called them the little people tricksters, but helpers.
Yeah, and keep in mind now, the Cherokee had a relationship with these beings, and they don't have emotions like you and I do. So you have to understand. Some call them tricksters. I haven't had that encounter. I haven't been tricked. I have had no negative experiences with them. It's all been positive. So, but I'm familiar with the Cherokee. I know that my family members were part Cherokee. I've been aware of that, and it's been brought up to me from some sources that asked me straight up, "Do you have any Cherokee in you?" And I said, "I sure do." It's on both sides, mother and father.
I didn't know.
Yep.
One more thing. This is for Nathan and everybody else out there. Don't forget that you can visit our website and use the contact button and tell us your story there. We welcome your story, your questions, comments, especially your videos. And every guest who's been on this show, there is a book and videos page which will take you directly to their page. Now, I'm going to ask this one question. I sorry to keep interrupting you, Chris. We just flooded.
No, this is great. We'll make this about questions. This is great.
This is Trudy from Cleveland. Wants to know if Chris has done any regression hypnosis. And then, of course, I'm going to turn it over to Johnny, for the EU and London question. Anyway, what do you have to say to Shruti?
I've actually have had 2 regressions. One I did in 2008 on television on the Discovery Channel. They filmed it with Dr. Michael O'Connell. He was trained at Harvard under John Mack. I loved him. He died, I'm sorry to say, at 80 years old. He was my friend. When everybody else left and all that, the investigators left, Dr. O'Connell and I stayed very close friends. And then did another regression this past year. And I've had 2, and there's a lot of information there.
That comes from them because of your subconscious. And I must say about John Mack, such a fantastic person, a teacher, Harvard Medical School, the psychiatric department with a medical degree, visited a lot of cities, states, and countries, including Zimbabwe, when that landing happened. And his death is very suspicious. I find it very hard to believe that he died simply by walking into the street and getting accidentally hit by a black cab in the UK. But that's a different story. Fortunately, his legacy still lives on, and we still have Daniel Sheehan, who's a good friend of ours, who's been on the show quite a few times, who is the Harvard attorney who defended him when Harvard wanted him out because of what he was studying. Because, as you know, this was much more taboo 20 years ago and even 10 years ago. But now it's finally more accepted. Nonetheless, Johnny, what do you got? I see you. There's a lot that I'm seeing. But I'm going to let you ask the UK and EU questions. Go ahead, Johnny.
Okay, well, the first one comes in from Pierre in Malmo in Sweden on the Facebook. And I think it's a he, but he asked Chris, is it true that the Bush family personally invited yourself to the George Bush inauguration?
Yes.
And have you ever spoken to the Bush family about your continued experiences? And did you ever feel in their presence that there were supernatural forces at work?
No. I was invited to a black tie dinner, the Bush inauguration.
Nice.
Through business. When I was in business, we were doing a lot of work, and I was actually nominated by the Republican Congressional Committee, the Businessman of the Year, and I think it was in 03 or 04, and was invited, and it was very sick and was sad to say I couldn't make it, and really wasn't into politics. I'm registered Republican because my father was, but I don't take sides. I don't get into politics because it's just not my thing.
And it's division. Politics is very divisive.
Yes.
So I agree with you with that. It divides people, and this two-party system, and then now having a third-party independent, and then a Tea Party. Why don't we just call us humans? Anyway,
right.
That's one question. But that's fantastic. That's something actually I didn't know, or if I did, or if it's in your bio, I overread that. But that is really important because there's a lot of things regarding Bush, especially Bush Sr., that he is one of the people in the know, working, being the CIA director, 78 to 79, then being vice president under Reagan, then becoming president. And he is the only president post his years of POTUS that still receives his daily CIA briefings, where everybody else, as soon as they finish, they're like, okay, I'm done with being president, I'm done with politics, why do I need to see CIA reports? Not him. He's 95 now, I believe, 94, 95, still receiving it. And we're talking about Herbert Walker, not George W., which is the one that you were invited to. Anyhow,
right.
Johnny, keep going. I see you. We got lots more traffic.
Well, Rory in Krakow, Poland asked Chris, do you think UFOs, ETs, and paranormal are related? One and the same?
I am 100% sure it is. 100%. And I can pretty well, I think I can prove it because of, like Dr. J and I were talking earlier, until 07, I had never thought of the paranormal. I was too busy with 4 children and a business. But after this experience in '07, immediately the paranormal stuff starts. So we've had a huge amount of paranormal activity. And is it paranormal? Is it ET? Or is it angelic beings? I'd have to have the experts to tell me that. All I can tell you is my wife has seen them, my children have seen them, my mother, my nieces, and a lot of other folks. We've had beings that appear, and they look like the movie Predator, when you see this being that you can see it, but it's clear like. Well, you'd see that, and plain as day, walking 5 foot tall.
What sort of size are they? What sort of size are they, Chris? Are they normal?
Be big as you and I. Big as you and I, like regular size usually. 5 foot tall maybe. And they'll just flash like a flash of light, and poof, they're gone. And we've had chairs turn over, doors opening and closing. And Grant Cameron has seen things. He's been here with me and witnessed my Labrador Retriever, something, and I think it was just so, it was more for show instead of something of negative. But he witnessed this dog start bleeding from the neck, a cut on her neck appear, and blood was shot out all over his pants legs, and she was bleeding to death. And I grabbed her. She ran in the door. Blood was shooting on the floor and on the walls, and I panicked. And I'm looking up at Grant. What do I do? What do I do? And my children were there and other friends, and I laid my hand on her neck. I laid her on the patio, blood everywhere. I could feel her heart beating and blood coming up between my fingers. And I said, somebody help me. And Chris Jr. runs in and gets a napkin. Not a napkin, but a washcloth. And I laid it on her neck, and I have photos. Grant documented this. And after about a minute, I picked my hand up because it just felt different. And when I did, the cut was gone and the blood was gone, and there was nothing, not even a sign. And there was a slash on her neck that was 1.5 inches long. And it was amazing stuff. Is all I can say.
Let me say
I'm
one.
sure to this.
I actually tend to agree with that, and so do a lot of researchers. As one person, when you come to California, I want to introduce you to over the phone, Preston Dennett, fantastic researcher. He's not one of those armchair researchers. He is literally, what you'd expect. So if there was something happening in Catalina, he will go to Catalina. He's on his 21st book, 30 years, a MUFON investigator, not to mention before that. But last time you were on, if you recall, Grant Cameron was the guest co-host. When I told him, because he's a great friend of mine, he is so down to earth, reminds me of you, because he's dedicated to the cause. He doesn't care about the money. He just wants the truth. And he has switched from presidential UFO, where it's just about the facts of do they know, to consciousness, to people who have contact, and people who, so for instance, one of the lectures that he had done when he was in California, I think about 1.5 years ago, was about musicians who are programmed to talk or to basically when they're in the womb, their mothers are being taken, and they are they're talking about extraterrestrials and UFOs and paranormal in their music, almost as if, because the extraterrestrials or anything involving paranormal knows that these people have influence via their fans. By them saying it and validating it, you all of a sudden have millions of people that will say, wow, Tom DeLonge said that, or Ozzy Osbourne wrote a song about this. Well, that must be true. And Jack Osbourne's been on the show a couple of times, 3 times actually, to be exact, not to mention all the phone calls we've had off the record, off the show, and the books that I've provided to him, including one that my webmaster has even written to in the collectors, and Preston Dennett's book, UFOs Over California. But let me ask you this. Can you tell us a little more about Grant Cameron coming to visit you. And let me just warn you, we have a little under 10 minutes before our first break, and then by all means, we're going to continue afterwards.
Well, I met Grant in 2012 at this event called The Gathering. I met him on the bus from the airplane to the hotel, and we become friends right away, my wife and I. And I'd never met anybody in the UFO world. I didn't have any intentions whatsoever of being involved with the UFO world anymore after 2007 because of everything that happened, ridicule, my children going to school and getting made fun of. They come home crying, teachers calling them up in front of the class, my daughter. And so I had this experience in 2012 at Easter time, right around Easter. And it's a long story, and it deals with this beautiful lady. Because honestly, for 5 years, I was having experiences all the time. And it was horrifying because I felt alone. It wasn't scary that I was dealing with this by myself, my family and I, and we didn't understand, and we're still trying to figure it out. But I was struggling with the fact they were trying to convince me to tell the world it's about benevolence. It's about a divine thing, good and evil. And this is what they were telling me. And I believed it, but I couldn't believe it enough to tell even my mother that. And so in 2012, I'm struggling. I'm really internally struggling. Around Easter, it was right before Easter, I hear this voice in the middle of the night, just at 3 a.m. It said, "Arise," real deep in a manly voice. And I sit up in the bed and I look around. There's nobody I could see, and I noticed it was 3 o'clock. And to make a long story short, I got to looking, and I could see these beings standing at the wall, kind of in the shadow. And they had me get dressed. They led me out of the room, out to our dog kennels, which my father raised hunting dogs. He had 104 one time. I'll never forget. But he always had 30 or so. And there's still dogs back there, even though he passed away. My cousin raises them. So they lead me out, and I had this encounter with this. They handed me this object and said, "This is yours. You must keep this." And I wish I had more time because I feel rushed. But long story short, this great wind comes charged from the forest at me, and out comes this translucent bull. And I know this sounds crazy, but it happened.
Translucent what? Door?
A bull, like
bull.
A cow.
Oh.
Ran me over and knocked me flat on my back, but it didn't hurt me. I landed on my back, rolled to my stomach, up on my knees. I'm ready to run because I think it's coming back, right? And when I come up on my knees, here's a lady now, this beautiful woman. She's probably 5 foot tall. And this is a whole other story, but Doug Auld painted her, and Albert Rosales just put it on the cover of his new book, his painting. So she tells me, she says, then I realized that this beautiful lady is wearing this Roman-looking dress that's shimmering, and she's glowing. She's hovering 3 feet off the ground, 6 feet away from me, looking at me. And she says, "You have a burden you must bear." And I never told many people about what she told me. In fact, there's still things I haven't revealed. But that forever changed my life. And it was when that happened is when I decided at that point I had to start talking about this. Before then, I wouldn't. And so immediately I get this call for this gathering event, and I went. I met Grant, and within a month or two after we met, he has a citizen's hearing he's involved in.
Yes.
And after that was over, he calls me and he says, "Hey, look, I'm on the way to Florida to this event, and I'd like to stop by and see you on the way." I said, "Come on." And he comes and he stays 2 days. and some strange stuff happens. Doors opening and dogs coming in. I take them out and the door would open. They come back in, and he's like, yeah, okay, maybe so. But then he starts back from Florida, and he calls and says, hey, I got a couple more days. I'd like to come back by on the way. So I said, come on. And as he gets near the house, he calls and he says, I'm 10 minutes away. I said, well, drive on up to the backyard. I'll be waiting on you at the back door. So I open the door. I walk out. It's a sunny day, cool, not real hot. So I didn't even close the door. He pulls up to the back. He says, I got to see this burning tree. And this is another thing that happened, a tree catching on fire. By itself, it spontaneously combusted. So we're out taking photos of the tree. We walk back to the house. My Labrador Nellie's following, and she's laying at our feet in the grass. And that's when I said, Grant, would you like to put your clothes, your suitcase in the house? He said, sure. So when he turned, he was between me and the house. He turned to go towards the back door. I took a step behind him. Nellie, she stands up, and as she goes by Grant, I see the blood shoot out of her neck. Something did it all in that moment. And I believe it was for him to witness. But that's how Grant and I met, and we've been very good friends. I really like Grant. He's a great guy.
Yes.
And if you ask him, he'll tell you, I think, that it was I that called him or emailed him and said, there's messages within the music. Beans told me that.
That's why when we were off air, and we, he emails me all the time of news, and then he calls me when it's something, because I get so many emails, I have to have staff monitor them. I just can't keep up with 1,200 to 2,000 emails a day. The point being is I'm always in communication with Grant, and like you said, he's a great guy, and he's very dedicated. Now, the beauty of us being on this network, in the Coast to Coast PM network, we have the option of having a soft break, meaning whenever we can. So let me get these 3 questions before we get to the break, because technically we should be taking the break now. But real quick, let me say this. How has your family been affected? Then I'll turn it over to the London and EU.
How has my family been affected?
Affected by all of the contacts, things coming over your house and your properties, and so on and so forth.
Well, they could answer that themselves, but they all have experienced it, every one of them, and regularly.
Especially your son, right?
Well, and even all of them. My daughter, my youngest child is a girl, 3 boys. I have 3 boys and a girl. My oldest son, Chris Jr., he's 27 now. He was 17 when it happened. Emily, she's 19. She wouldn't tell her mother for years that she was experiencing this. She's a little magnet. I mean, so she was with Dr. Alexander and his wife and I when this experience happened. But they all experience it. They all understand it as being benevolent. They're not scared of it. They love it. They love the people that come. We have lots of folks that come and they share their experiences. And it's a loving thing. It's just turned out very good, Dr. J. I just have to say.
And you know what? I think the way you deferred it to them, that's the best way, because, how can someone else answer someone else's questions about how they feel other than to speculate? So this just goes to show again how awesome and honest and down to earth, person you are. This is why I think it's always an honor. Let me see. We have Nathan. By the way, if you could please stay muted that way, because we got some background noise when you were on. Okay. Before we take this break, we got. We'll just take this one question, Johnny, and then we'll take the rest after break. Go ahead, Johnny.
It's interesting because what you were just talking about was quite apt for what this question was. Again, addressed it to Chris. Treaser in Clacton, England on Facebook says, Chris seems always to feel more spiritual to his experience than fearful or physical. Does Chris feel that his experiences are demonic or angelic or a new unknown species?
I tend to think it's definitely spiritual. I think that if you want to experience this, you got to look in that direction. I know it. I know it. I know it. I know it. It's a spiritual thing, and it's been angelic more so than anything. And what is an angel? I don't know. What does that mean? To me, it has something to do with a positive thing, right? A biblical thing.
As opposed to a demon. And in the past, it meant something that came from the heavens above, meaning the sky. And you're right about benevolent. That's always what's referred to, because if they were angels coming to harm us, they would be labeled as demons or fallen angels. So I'm glad you put it that way. If you don't mind, Chris, we got to take this quick, short break. Everybody stay tuned, and remember, we are still live. We'll be right back after 2 short minutes.
This is Michael Tillinger. You're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
This is David Sarita. You're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
This is John Anthony West, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
That is absolutely correct. Welcome back to Hour 2 of Dr. J Radio Live. As you heard it from Mike Dukakis yourself, former governor of Massachusetts, and, should I say, former presidential candidate who lost to George Herbert Walker Bush in 1988. Fantastic guy, still teaching at 2 universities, Northeastern University in Massachusetts for most of the year, and in the wintertime right here in Los Angeles at UCLA, where right now it happens to be a little bit after 8 p.m. Pacific time, where my guest is, and everywhere else in the East Coast, it is a little after 11 p.m. Eastern time, and where my co-host, Johnny Webb, is through 4:04 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Now we are listening on the Coast to Coast PM radio network, and like I said, this is the Dr. J Radio Live host, Dr. J Radio Live show, and I'm your humble host, Dr. J. Now we have been speaking to, if you join us late, the one and only, very humble and incredibly humble and fantastic, down-to-earth person who has so much to tell that I don't think I can ever get everything I want to answer from him, because there's just so much information of what he's experienced, things that continue to happen to this day. From the date I booked him, literally, I have seen photographs and videos of things that have happened almost daily. And he lives in Pennsylvania. There's just so much to the story, so I'm just actually going to turn it over to him for some quick promotion. Mr. Bledsoe, is there any website, anything you want to direct people at before we pick up the second hour of conversation?
Well, not that I'm aware of. I'm on Facebook, Christopher Bledsoe Sr. You can look me up there if you'd like. Just hit me up as a friend, and we can chat. I get a lot of that, but I try to reach everyone. I don't try to promote myself. Never have. I just want to promote the truth.
And that's why I think you're so fantastic. You're not pushing for interviews. You've turned down major motion pictures. You've turned down documentaries, and you've turned down books. Why? Because, like you said, you're in this for the truth, not for the money. And I am a good reader of people because I've studied psychology for 20 years. It's also one of my pastimes. Now, most people know the reason where the doctor comes from is because I am a Juris Doctor, which means I went to law school. And then on top of that, I got a certificate in dispute resolution. So I know a lot about psychology, sociology, and human behavior. What Chris is saying absolutely happened to him. And if skeptics are saying, well, how do I know it happened to him? Well, then let me say this. Whatever he's saying, he absolutely believes it. And you know what? I'm going to go on a limb out there and say I believe everything Chris says because of the amazing person he is and how incredibly open he is to answering questions and having such incredible context, which why I'm willing to set him up with other people that they deserve to speak to someone of such high caliber. Nonetheless, I'm going to pick this up with the questions that never got answered before we went to break. So let's go back to Johnny in the UK. I know you had a couple that you were sitting on before I go on to mine. What do you got, Johnny?
Well, I've got Pamela in Clapham in England, again, very close to me, and I thought I'd pick that one out. But she asks, can Christopher tell us the connection with John Mack that he had? And was it before he'd had an experience? And does he feel that the experience through John Mack might have intervened with him?
Well, I never knew Dr. Mack. In fact, he had passed, I think, just around the time or just before my experience in 2007. But who I did meet was a very close friend of his that studied under him, that went to Harvard School, trained as a psychologist under him. And he learned his regression therapy from Dr. Mack. So I'm sad to say I never met him. I wished I had him. I've heard many, many great stories from his very close friends. But I didn't know him, and I'm sad that I didn't. But I really admire him. He was a wonderful guy, and my hat's off to, he was the pioneer. He's the one in his position to step out and say it's real. Well, you should listen to him. Everybody should pay him attention because he was right, and he was right.
We have a caller, area code 951. Welcome to the show. Name and where are you calling from?
It's SoCal Dan.
Dan the man, my friend. How you doing?
Oh, I've been trying to join the conversation, but I lost your chat icon on your website. But no problem. I love to call anyway. I have a couple of questions actually, and a comment for Mr. Bledsoe. One of the questions is one that I'd like to ask experiencers like yourself. If you could get a straight answer from these people, would it help you deal with deal with it in your own mind?
And you say from these people, you mean from the beings or from whom?
I have to regard them as people because they have their own consciousness, individuality. You know, so
right.
I can't feel them as something spiritually only. You know, I feel them as a physical presence.
Well, and they're both physical and spiritual. That's the strange thing. It's like Dr. Alexander says, it's very complicated. Yes, I wish they could appear tomorrow, and actually, I'm expecting that about any moment, actually, because everything has gotten so intense. I actually have video. I have a video of me standing beside this tree that spontaneously combusted. And it was taken by a very smart lady. She's a research scientist. Of this being, it walks up to where I'm standing. It flashes, this brilliant flash. You see the little one walk up to the tree, and it's right beside me. There were 4 people there witnessing it, and the video camera caught it. The being walks up. This flash happens. There's an 8-foot one standing next to the tree, and I'm, like I said, they're both beside me. Of course, you can't see me in the video because it's dark. And then this little being turns and walks back to the camera. And the crazy thing is we have audio that was captured with it. I have it. We have over 350 audio clips. We have it. I kid you not. And the audio said, "We're abducting. Would you like to go back to heaven with us or to the backside of the moon?" I'm telling you, we have this. So what does it mean? I leave this to the experts. All I know is it's happening. It's been happening. I can prove it. I have the smoking gun, but I'm not going to, I don't release this publicly. I don't intend to unless something changes at this point. It's crazy. It's just crazy is all I can say. It's real. It's there. I never know when they're going to appear and say, "Come, walk in here." Now, they come in my sleep. They come in the dark. They come in the middle of the night, and you wake up, boy, that was real. Oh, my Lord. But to land in the middle of the day in your driveway and say, "Come get in," I'm not doubting that don't happen at any moment. Honest to truth. And I've been warned of that.
That kind of answers my other question. I was going to ask you if you feel them as an extra dimensional presence, or as if they slip into our dimension, or but I think you've answered that. But I wanted to let you know that there is a camera that you got to get. It's called a full spectrum camera. It's for use in ghost hunt. It's not the green screen stuff. And I say the full spectrum because I think that's the way they actually see is off into the UV spectrum. And I think you're going to catch more because I tell you, I made a discovery last year, and I've been inundated by these craft of all different sizes, shapes, colors, lights everywhere. And followed also, but that's a completely other story. The way I catch them now, I've turned into a complete skywatcher, is with this little Ghost Pro, and it only runs for $100 or so. It's weatherproof. You set it up on a tripod or wherever you want to, indoor, outdoor, and it catches things in the UV spectrum that are just amazing me, to tell you the truth. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that they have something for you other than just straight night vision, which is kind of expensive, to tell you the truth.
I wished I had night vision. There's no telling what we'd see out here. I tell you what, we do see a lot of, not just me, but others. And others will tell you right up front they've seen it, or orbs. I was out recently. Just I can get them about any time I want. I can actually. And I don't want to say I hate to use that word, but I have been successful at photographing visible and invisible orbs. In other words, I take a photo and you may not see it and it shows up in the photo. But we have a lot of ones we see around here that appear just recently. And it's time-stamped. I can't give you the date, but it was recently. I was sitting on the patio, and I had a fire going right by myself, leaning back, looking straight up. And I see this flash of light and this pulsating craft, or I say craft, what is it? I don't know. It's a ball of light, brilliant white. It starts pulsating above me, sitting still, and then all of a sudden it takes off to the north very slowly, and it starts dimming down until it disappears. Well, then a minute later, this orb appears in a tree right over my chicken coop, big oak tree, and it's flying through the tree like undulating, like rolls in the ocean. It would go up and down, and it would disappear, and then 10 foot up in front, it would come back on. So it would become visible, invisible. Well, it flew around through a couple of trees and came right over my head, and 10 feet away, I took a photo of it. And there's clearly something in there, and nobody can say it's not. It's not. It's there. It's in this ball, and I have photos of people, babies, dogs, clear as a day, in orbs. And
I'm actually really glad you mentioned orbs. We got a few questions waiting. Dan, were you done, by the way?
Yes, sir. I'm gonna listen to the rest of the show on air. Thank you, Dr. J.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for coming out, Mr. Bledsoe. You just can't keep this information to yourself.
You can't. And as a matter of fact, that's the first thing. This is actually coming from South America. Joaquin in Medellin, Colombia, asks, when is Mr. Bledsoe coming back?
And coming back is to where?
I'm assuming to the show.
Whenever you'll have me.
Okay, you're always welcome. This just shows how much a pleasure it is to me, and how important you are to the listeners, and how much they like you. Okay, let's get to the first. Now these are two questions. I'm going to go ahead and read these. These are technically EU, and then I'm going to turn it over to Johnny. This is Giovanni in Milan, Italy. What can you tell us about owls that are seen by abductees? And I'm going to interject that and say that from a lot of the hypnosis experts or hypnotherapists and hypnosis experts I've spoken to, as well as the abductees and people who have been contacted, that the owls are sort of mistaken for grays because of their eyes. But nonetheless, that was the question. What can you tell us about owls that are seen by abductees?
Well, I have a long history with owls, and it starts when I was shot. When I was 10 years old, my mother took me to church for Christmas. We had this little church thing at the local church, and she dropped me off. It was during Christmas. Of course, I was shot on New Year's Day. So she says, I was 10 years old. She said, I'll be back to pick you up when church is over. You come out and you stand by this tree. So I go out right by myself. I'm standing by the tree waiting on my mom. And it's a dirt driveway, no pavement back then. An old 1700 Civil War hospital. It was converted into it once. But I'm standing there looking for Mom, and she starts pulling in to my left, the driveway. And I look back to my right, and 3 feet from my shoulder height, 3 feet away, this great big owl is sitting there. It just appeared out of nowhere, and it stared me right in the face. I wasn't scared of it. It wasn't scared of me. I didn't know what it meant. And I'm like, Mom, do you see the owl? She said, no, I don't see the owl. I said, look, it's on the limb. She never could see it. Never did, but I saw it clear. And then I was shot 3 or 4 days later.
That reminds me of that Preston Dennett case of that woman in the subway in New York City who saw a gray alien about 5 to 7 feet away from her, crowded in the subway, like I said, rush hour, coming home from work where nobody else can see it. That reminds me of that. Anyhow, I didn't mean to cut you off, but go ahead.
Oh, no, that's great. There's many more accounts. 2000 and, my wife's better with dates, but our house was struck by lightning.
Wow.
And this was after. Let me say this. This was in 2008 or 07 to 08. In that year time frame, I went in depression. Didn't want to talk to anybody. My wife and I wasn't getting along because she said I was scaring the kids. She's big in the church. The church didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I either had to be quiet and accept it were demons, or, I wasn't welcome. And I just didn't go back. I knew what I experienced. I was praying to God, and demons come, I don't get it. Yeah. So, but I'm sitting, I lost contact with the world. And I lost all my friends, and I didn't want to be involved with anybody else. You don't believe me? Fine. Then I'm moving on. So I had this crazy idea. I've got to reach out. So I buy CB radio, of all things, put this big old antenna up in the backyard, and I keyed the mic when I first got it. It's a $1,000 radio. It was really powerful. It could talk, miles, several states over. But the first person I talked to, his handle was 77, and he introduced me to a guy by the name of E.T. Come to find out, he was very sick, very sick, 40 years old, and had 30 or 40 operations. And I ended up going, I found out everybody on this radio are sick people, and they can't get out of the house. So I spent the next 3 years looking after these folks. I'd go to their house and help them with their equipment and take them to my home, and I spent a lot of time with people that needed some help. And I walk out one morning, 3 years after that, and I look up. So this had to be about, 2010 or 11. And I look up at 7 in the morning. There's a great big owl sitting on my antenna in July. And it kind of weirded me out. I'm like, oh my God, what's this thing doing sitting on the antenna? Well, that afternoon, the thunderstorm rolls up. I'm sitting there beside my radio, right, and I'm beside my chair. Thunder starts booming. I reach up, turn the radio off. I walk out to the front porch to look out to see what's coming. My wife's sitting there, and we heard crack, boom, that quick. My daughter was there. She scared her to death. She ran inside because of lightning, and she came running back out the door. Oh, my gosh, Dad, the house is on fire. So I go in the room. Lightning hit the antenna, did $35,000 worth of damage to the house, and would have killed me if I hadn't got out of that chair. And all happened, the owl was there that morning. And he's all, when the experience happened in 07, that night, 3 owls take up residence in the house. The night that Dr. Alexander and I had an experience, the owl started hooting, and I said, listen, they're here now, I know it. And right then the craft appeared within 15 seconds. So I know there's...
Did that happen with Grant Cameron as well, an owl?
I don't know if he saw an owl with me or not, but it did with John, and it did with... in every thing where there's been danger or where there's been some kind of encounter, there's been owls involved, and it's been all my life. And Mike Clellan, a very good friend, he wrote about this in a book everybody must buy called The Messengers. It's about owls. It's a wonderful book. And he put this story in there, our son, and it's a must read. I would suggest.
A couple more questions, and then I got to turn it over to the UK. I'm going to continue with Giovanni's second question because it had to do with what you said before. Then I'm going to go to a question from Delaware before we go back to across the Atlantic pond. Okay, back to Giovanni. What can you tell us about the orbs that have faces in them?
Oh, my Lord, that's a strange one. I have orbs that have full, tall little babies, feet, legs, arms, and plain.
Wow.
Plain. I have orbs that have, in fact, I have a dog that chased the little being that I described as glassy looking.
Yes.
Because I put her on this thing. I thought it was somebody trying to break in. Anyhow, 2 weeks later, she dies.
Really?
My father's, she
your
died.
dog died.
2 weeks.
How old was
2
she?
weeks later. 4 years old, fully
young.
110 pounds.
So there's no way she would have died, out of natural causes unless an unknown cancer or something. But that's very, very strange.
Yeah, and I have marks in the yard, these big circles where these things landed, and I think she got too close to it. They believed they said the life was sucked out of her, so we all think it was just radiation poisoning of some sort. But I was out by her grave where I buried her just a month or two ago, and she this orb take a photo, and here as plain as day is my dog, and this orb big as a basketball floating around, and I think anybody can see it. It's just a dog. It's plain as day. It's not like you can barely make it out. There's a dog in this video, in this orb.
And the irony is so many people use the term the size of basketball. I mean, this is an international thing. It's not as if one person said it and then 20 people, use the same expression. And we're talking about, literally people who have described it, never have been interviewed them or heard interviews or have watched documentaries and say, I've seen floating orbs that have flown in and around my house, outside, above, and they're the size of basketballs, including a child. Anyhow, let me ask this question here. This is Stephen. Stephen, thank you for asking, from Wilmington, Delaware. He wants to know if he has done any of the ET contact protocols. That's actually, he means you. Have you done any of the ET contact protocols from Stephen Greer? I'm assuming.
No, I really don't know what the protocols
you essentially
are.
do them, because when you pray and something appears, in that sense, that sort of, he sets up his own protocols, but a lot of people around this planet have used some sort of praying or meditation into saying, if you're here, come and show yourself, and boom, they're there. Or they'll point to an area like you did over the tree line, like you said, 20 degree. I think this was off the air before we even went on, and then it shows up. So I think that's just super, super fantastic. Anyhow, let's go back to UK. Johnny Webb, what you got?
Well, Wendy in Cork in Ireland on Facebook, she's asking, have you seen any of the work of Dr. David Jacobs, the hypnotic regressor? He studied 1,200 abduction cases. He says that there's a very definite dark side to all this interaction. There are many experiences who show that a takeover is in place. Do you have any dark experiences or memories portraying to what he says? Is it a takeover of humanity?
No, not at all. I have not read his book, although I'm familiar with Dr. Jacobs. And would love to meet him. And I agree. It's both good and bad. I would be afraid if I was a negative person, and I lived a negative life and everything was negative and dark. I would be afraid what might come calling on me. So to me, it's definitely spiritual. It's definitely good versus bad. It's both physical and non-physical. And I'd say be very careful with how we live. That's why it's time to awaken. That's why it's time to get rid, to change this world we're in trouble. This world is in trouble. People are in fear. People are scared. Look what's happening around this world. There's riots going on and people without homes, and it's time that we stop. This is why I think that they're coming. They're wanting us to tell this positive message. We've got to wash this negativity away because we're creating it.
Yeah, I've got another quick question here on Facebook from Russell in London. I think it's quite apt. He says he wants to know, what does your local church say about your experiences?
That's a hard one. For the most part, the churches believe they're demonic, for the most part.
That's right. They call them Nephilim.
Yes, and I would challenge, I don't want to challenge anyone's belief, but I can tell you, read the Exodus story, and it says, and the angel of the Lord went before the children of Israel for 38 years in a pillar of or pillar-shaped cloud. The cloud was on fire at night, and it dropped food out to them in the morning, and it gave them shade during the day. And everywhere this cloud went, the people camped underneath it. So, I mean, come on, folks. It's in the Bible. There's a connection. Those ancients it's there.
What's interesting is that you've quoted a few things from the Bible, but it also mentions, and what I've also found through reading the Bible, is whenever there is some kind of interaction, be it angels or other entity beings, in the Bible, all of these people that are interacted with, it clearly states they're all fearful of the experience,
Sure.
Have you felt
But they're fearful initially, but afterwards they're grateful. I've never heard of someone who has had contact or has been so-called abducted who later on says, when they're asked, if you can go back in time and prevent this from happening, would you do so? And everybody unequivocally says, no, I am glad this happened. Yes, I was fearful, but I learned and I have a mission, or so on and so forth. The point is everybody's fearful of the unknown. Why? Because as a society, we're told monsters do not exist. So when you see something that is not human looking, or you see something that defies our known physics, or our, should I say, mainstream physics, because I'm sure that, those higher up in, private organizations that are, above the CIA or like Men in Black probably have, technology that would surpass what we know, things that can fly faster than the speed of light. But nonetheless, I just think it's fantastic. Johnny, were you finished? Because I got one here waiting already.
Go for it, Dr. J.
Okay, this is Michael in Portland, Oregon. It's pretty simple, actually. It says, where can we see your footage?
I've never shared that footage. That's I've shared some with you, Dr. J.
Yeah.
And I've been very careful about putting it out because it's not my place to do this, right? I'm not a conspiracy type person. I love my country. I love my government. Yeah, I think that they know, or some of the people are not the government necessarily. I think they're aware that things are happening. They're not stupid, but what it is, I'm not sure they know what it is. I'm not sure. And two, it's national security. If they are keeping a secret, and that's what I would say. They're doing it for a good reason, not a bad reason. They got to figure this thing out. So I would feel better if somebody, and I haven't asked anybody, could I put it out there and it not, and I not do something wrong. I'm just afraid to do the wrong thing. It's, you understand? You know what I'm saying? But I think Dr. J can vouch that I had some footage here, and other people can as well. And maybe in time we do put some of it out.
Agreed. And I'll wait for that after the air. But let's continue back to missions. I think that's a very important topic. And then I'm going to go back to, let's talk about what's happened recently. When I mean missions, such as I meant with musicians earlier, and Jim Sparks says his mission now is to save the rainforests, stop them from being cut down. He suggested that we, so for the third world countries that are cutting down the rainforests for lumber, give them money to tell them to stop they're cutting down the trees so they can pay for what they need to pay instead of using the lumber, or provide them with other means to save our planet, because the way he describes it is the rainforests are the lungs of Mother Earth. And I would have to say, agree, right?
Right, I agree 100%. And that's part of the message. The lady that I met, I believe to be Mother Earth or Gaia, or I don't know, but she's beautiful, and these beings bow to her. There's a great book, a true story called The Mojave Incident, and it's very similar to what happened with us. She talks about these beings and the lady and everything. So, I agree with Jim Sparks, but it's greater. I think climate change is happening. I'm sure of it. I think everybody sees the weather's weird, and crops just liable to start failing, and there's 23 million people displaced from it. And it's time we do something. It's time we change the consciousness of this planet, awaken, come together in peace and love, and before it's too late.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning, before I even bring up the consciousness and the love, change the way of our planet. First, not only do we have to stop this primitive tribal warfare that's been going on for thousands of years. I mean, some of the earliest skeletons that were found have spears in them. It's always at the hands of another. So that's one thing. The other thing is, look at the damage that we have done to this planet. Not just the smog, not just the fossil fuels, but the extinction of other animals. People forget that, sure, we come from this planet, but it's not ours. It has never been ours. If you look at the long history of Earth, what are the estimates? 4.54 billion years, right? What do we have? 250,000 years? So, and we share this planet with so many other species that I've read, the recent estimate now is that we haven't even discovered 90% of them. And then I was reading something about the woolly mammoth, right? And of course, it was, sure, after the Ice Age, some of them died naturally. But humans hunted a lot of them. And the latest living woolly mammoths were about 4,000 years ago, 2,000 or so BC, because they were isolated on islands that didn't have humans to kill them. Look at the dodo bird. We killed its habitat, So you're right. You're absolutely right about that. Before I continue about that, we got another question. Johnny, what do you have? What are you reading? Is it Facebook or a message board, or what do you got? Johnny Webb. Maybe we lost our London connection, but let me double check on that and I will bring him back. Johnny, you still with us? Okay, that's okay. He's gone. He'll come back and I'll let him ask his question when he's back. I want to ask you about consciousness. I think that is so important for multiple reasons. First of all, once we are able to be conscious and aware, we will wake up and get out of this matrix. When I mean matrix, it's as you wake up, you eat breakfast, smoke a few cigarettes, drink your coffee, go to work, come home, eat supper, maybe argue with your wife, hopefully not, spend time with your children and sleep, repeat, and I forgot to mention the bills. With all these bills coming in and all this stress and worry, your mind is so preoccupied with what's going on, you don't think about the bigger picture of consciousness and love. And love is to feel, to be, to give. That's the biggest thing. Loving is giving. And we need to get there where it's not just, some of us or a percentage of us. I think it needs to be 100% of us, where we have to love each other unconditionally. And I think if that happens, the violence will drop. What do you say, Chris?
I'd say I'm 100% with you on that. In fact, that was one of the things that was told to me by these beings. The reason I mentioned consciousness was the way they explained it to me is that everything is connected. All living things, earth, the trees, the plants, the animals, you and I, everything. We're living in this frequency, this vibration. I know that these beings live in a different frequency. They move very fast, very quick. And it shows up in the video. We have to slow it down to 45 seconds instead of 10 seconds to really understand what we're looking at, because it goes so fast you'd never see it. When you slow it down, you're like, oh my gosh. But long story short, we're all connected. And as a global consciousness, everybody's feeling fear, everybody's feeling panic, everybody's scared at this very moment. So the earth begins to react. The animals and the trees and earthquakes and everything starts ramping up. The weather
volcanoes, the weather, all of it.
And it's all because of this negative. Every time you turn the television on, it's bad. It's bad.
That's right.
It's
the news. What do you see on the news? You turn on the news, instead of saying, this charity group, gave or donated food and prevented famine for this country. This person went over to the floodings of West Virginia and took the people out and put them in new homes. You don't hear about that. You hear about the assassination of cops. Then it comes down to the local murders. Then it comes down to the arson. Then the burglaries. The good stories are about the last 30 seconds to minute of the 30 minutes or hour. So you're right. It's fear, and fear controls. Now, we got Johnny back, but before we do that, I got it should be a fairly simple question, but it's more speculation, but I have to ask you because this is a listener. Jim in Kansas City. Where do you think these beings / ETs come from? Have they said?
I think the whole entire universe is a biologically inspired, bio-inspired universe. In other words, I think life is everywhere. I think even in the darkness of space is full of life that we just can't see it. But I also believe that there is some sort of a sphere or bubble around this planet that is being guarded by certain beings that doesn't allow, they protect us. So I think there's some always around us, always. And those are the ones that hear us. I think the ancients called them angels. Other than that, I can't tell you who or what. The experts can debate on this for centuries. But I know they're there, and I know they hear us. I know they hear me. I ask this question to people all the time. Is it they hear me or certain people, or do they hear all of us? And a friend from NASA I got to meet, I've met quite a few down there, but one told me, he said, I believe it's like the Bible says, where more than one is gathered, they will hear you. And that tends to say the same thing you were just saying, Dr. J, about when people meditate and pray, they hear you. So I think there are these type beings around us, but I think there are also ETs that come maybe from distant planets. And did certain factions in the government run across some negative ones and make them mad? I think that's very possible. You never know. I just don't know. I think there's both good and bad, but I think there's a protection around us. If there wasn't, we wouldn't be here.
Agreed.
would, you know. So
here's a quick comment. I think it's fantastic. This comes from Lou Sheehan, Rancho Cucamonga, California. It essentially says, I lost it here. Where is it? It says here, good spiel on environment, global warming, and the great extinction. I think that's fantastic because it's a very important topic. But with that being said, we got Johnny in London where it is now 5 a.m. Go ahead, Johnny.
It's 4:46, yeah. Now, just going back to what you were just talking about there, I recently saw a few videos that were showing meteors striking over Russia, obviously from last year and the year before. And what it clearly showed was these little sort of orbs that were sort of breaking down this meteor and sort of dispersing it. Do you think that there's evidence of that, other than these video clips that we see, but do you think that the aliens or these people that you're experiencing, these beings, are here to do that kind of work for Earth?
Yeah.
So what I mean by that, Chris, is that for me, you sound more, it's more spiritual, it's more, for you, as I'd say Christian, it's more sort of some sort of higher being from the Lord, in a sense. You haven't said it's the Lord, you haven't said it's that, but I get the feel for that. Is that part of what you're feeling? Is it a sort of spiritual experience that you're having?
It's been a spiritual experience from the beginning, and I would say everybody looking, when you want to find something, you got to look in the right direction. And if you want to have experiences, I think we got to humble ourselves. That's the key. It's within your heart. That's my experience. I used to be very short with people. I had people work for me. I never even knew their name, and even the receptionists at the desk. That's where I was, and I didn't have time for people. Now my heart has changed. There's a love for the environment. There's a love for nature. I took on gardening. I can't get enough of it. I have to be near nature, and I started painting birds and flowers and animals, and I never painted in my life. And it's just trying to express what I can't describe. Yes, it's to me, it's very spiritual. And to say, is it of the Lord? I want to say it is, but I was a deacon in the Pentecostal Holiness Church, which is a very spiritual church, very good people. I was a fundamentalist. I believe the earth was made in 6 days and the seventh day rested. I was taught that, right, all my life. And I'm not saying, I'm telling you now, I see things differently. I still believe what I believe, but I believe differently. Is all I can say. And I believe it's all connected to the spirit world, to E.T., to God. I believe God's real. I believe it's all about that.
It has to be in that sense because let's just say if people like Eric von Däniken or take it a step back to Zechariah Sitchin, that or other people who say that we were created at the hands of ETs. Or a couple of interviews ago, Linda Moulton Howe comes on fairly often. She mentioned the fact that one of her sources, a few of her sources, because she vets everything with the journalism, what we call rules of three. So, for instance, let's just say you provide a video for me, right? And you're let's just say somebody anywhere in the world provided me a video, and I don't know who that person is. I don't know their credibility. What I would do, that's the first piece of evidence, the video. The second thing would be, well, I need to speak to the photographer and anybody who else was in the video talking and seeing this. And also neighbors, try to find corroborating witnesses who saw the craft but maybe didn't film it. The third piece of evidence would be, for instance, taking it to a laboratory to prove what's caught in the sky or what's caught on video is actually in the sky, not manipulated, as many people do, unfortunately. So, nonetheless, I just think it's important. Anyway, here is a question. The only reason I'm rushing is because we're getting close on time. And I love it when interviews fly like this because it means there's so much important information. And as you can tell, we have a lot of people here who are asking questions that have been, really in tuned to what you say. So I'm going to ask this. This is from Arthur Kane in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where I think that's your time zone, if I'm not mistaken. What message can you give to abductees who are still scared of ETs showing up in their rooms, paralyzing them, and taking them against their will on their craft? I'm assuming that's because they're at the early stages before they accept it.
I would say, for one, there's nothing you can do about it. Period. Accept it, but you can, ask for it to stop. And I've heard that would be the case, but not me. I stand out in the yard every night and I look up the sky and say, "Come, please take me." I want to get away from this.
I want to see them. I want a landed craft. I want these ETs to come out. I want a tour of the ship. I want to be taken to the moon, shown a base. I want to see what their cities look like, what their family life is like. How is their society? Do they mate? Do they have wives and children the way we do on Earth? That's exactly what. So the way you said it, that's what I want. And like you said, Mr. Kane here sounds like he's scared, but they brought him home in one piece. It's not like they inserted a virus into him. And going back to the point I was making about terraforming Earth for 270 million years, well, then you have to ask the question, who made the beings who made us? And if they were made by somebody else, well, then who made them? Then who made the planets? Who made the universe? There has to be a supreme being of some sort. So that's why I tend to believe what you say. Okay, let's see what you got here. Johnny, what you got? Final question, Johnny, because we're cutting close on time. Unless you got another one.
Just a personal input. Is it the creator or the created? I've always thought that there must have been a creator.
Yeah.
There was a big bang. Something had to create that. But to go back to an earlier thought that I was thinking of, it was regarding, and it's gone now off my head, so you'll have to excuse me for a second.
Well, I see one right here. It says, is there a question you would have to hear that wasn't mentioned here tonight?
Me, or are you asking me a question?
Is there a topic that's a communication from one of my staff? The point is there any topic that you haven't mentioned tonight? Like I said, we can have thousands of interviews. We're definitely going to have you back. It's always a rare time and a pleasure to speak to you on the air, off the air. But is there anything we skipped over that you find it important enough to tell the world, because we're on a global platform right now, that we haven't?
Put me on the spot there, Dr.
I know. I apologize. It's okay. We can move past it if you want. No problem.
I would just say,
be awake and aware. That's what
we're at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads in history. If we continue the path we're on, I think we're looking at trouble. Way worse. The trends are all pointing that way. It's time to awaken. I would say it's time for, if we want peace and we want happiness, I believe that it's going to take ET, angels, whatever anybody wants to call them. We have to change our belief system, and that's the way it's going to have to be. In other words, when the truth comes out and we understand that we're not the only selfish, we think we've got it all right, we think we're smart. Well, I can tell you, if the light switch goes out tomorrow and there's no power, you don't even want to go there. What starts happening? We begin to kill and eat one another. We have to eat the survive. So we're very primitive. They're scared of us, worse than we are of them, even though they want to help us. Because we shoot at them. We shoot at a ball of light, for heaven's sake, when it comes flying by. So
that's right.
We've got to grow
or
up.
beings, or saucers, or anything. That's right.
Yes.
So many cases I've seen right here, Southern California. Gangbangers see a flying saucer or a triangle that's hovering low. First thing they do is they run into their homes, or they pull what they call their gat out of their, their back, under their shirt, but, tucked into their pocket, their pants, pull it out and start shooting sideways. I can't get that image out of my head because I've heard so many people saying, "Oh, I'm going to kill them." And they tell me, "Oh, I saw something strange and I just shot at it and it went away." Well, it went away because, we're not, you're acting childish. You're not seeing what transpires. You're not accepting it. Anyhow, two more things. Before I give it to Johnny for his final question, let's ask this. This is an international question. I'll go ahead and ask because it's got to be very early in the morning. Krista in Sweden wants to know if Chris believes we need an overt ET intervention, or are they going to wait for us to do what is needed? And let me add this. This goes back to what we said off of air, of the fact that I believe, based on all the interviews, and I think you said you agree with this, that we have to evolve ourselves. But nonetheless, what do you say to Krista?
I would say we have a choice. They will come, and this was what I was told, that they will come only if the suffering of man becomes too great. In other words, if we can't help ourselves and we're about to destroy this planet, that's when they'll come and at least save the earth. And if there's few people left, then that's what happens.
Agreed.
But if we invite them, we accept them, and we change our fear into acceptance and know it's real. Once you know it, then it becomes a relationship. So I think they'll come help us if we ask them to. But we got to learn the truth. We got to, the only way you're going to see them is accept them. If you're a skeptic and you don't believe, well, you're never going to see anything. I can promise you that.
Just like that woman on the subway bus. The people around the being probably didn't believe because she said they were surrounded. They were looking in that direction, but no one noticed it. So you're right. If you don't believe in it, you're not going to see it. And I've heard that time and time again. And with regards to saving and healing, when you come here, I'm going to introduce you to Preston. He wrote a book that I'm going to give to you. It's called UFO Healings. And it documents all the cases that he's investigated that, come from the West Coast and whatever he's gotten from the Americas, not including what's going on globally, where, for instance, a woman was sailing on a little boat in the Pacific Ocean. A storm comes, capsizes the boat. She's going to drown, and she's saved. Or, like you were cured of Crohn's disease. Other people have been taken, all of a sudden their cancerous tumor is gone. So I think you're right. There's just so much evidence out there with that. Anyhow.
Dr. J, can I make one comment?
Sure.
What I would like to say to everybody is until you are able to open up your door, then you will see what else is out there.
Yes. Well said. Johnny Webb, final question. Go ahead.
I just wanted to bring back an earlier mention where Chris was saying that once it's happening to you, there's nothing you can do about it. And that recalled a memory for me of a good video that I watched on YouTube by a guy called Joe Jordan, and he's a MUFON guy down in Florida. And he says, by calling Jesus' name 3 times with a real belief in him at that time, when you're being abducted, if you think, why I'm being abducted, then why can't you believe in the Jesus at that point is the emphasis. But at that point, if you call Jesus' name 3 times, my understanding is it stops those abductions on the spot and stops them reoccurring. So that's just my little input on that.
That's the truth, and I believe that. I believe that you have free will. They're trying to make contact with you, and if they are, you're a lucky person. I believe. They're trying to get the message to humanity through us. Look, people, any way they can. If you don't accept it and you're fearful of it, ask for Jesus or whoever you ask. If you ask, they leave. And they won't go against your free will. But if you want to be part of mankind, humanity, and saving this planet, open yourself up, be positive, live a positive life, be humble. You have choice. If you don't want to deal with it, then don't. But it's not a scary thing anymore to me. It's not to my wife. It's not to my children. It's part of life now. And my life has turned very positive. I'm not sick. I would walk to California tomorrow if I needed to if I had to, just to get rid of what I had.
Grabar de uno.
Yeah.
No mames. No seas cabrón. Wow. No mames.
No, I would stop.
No mames esto. ¿Sí lo ven? No.
And I'm
No.
glad you mentioned that.
No.
You keep thinking about negative, you're gonna manifest.
No beso.
Okay, unfortunately,
No.
being on the mid, our show off here. Everybody, thank
No puedo
you
creer
for
eso.
joining us tonight.
No.
Of course, I want to thank Mr. Bledsoe Sr.
Está gigante esa cosa, güey. No mames. ¿Ya viste a Anuel? ¿Y la No manches, güey. No mames. Cañón. Güey, es que ve eso. No se puede ver todos estamos viendo el ovni. No puedo creer. Ya no está. No, ahí está.
Pero ya no se ve con la misma fuerza.
No, se veía gigante.
Eso de ninguna manera puede ser un avión.
No. Ve eso. Prende de repente luces hasta abajo.
Let's not forget,
No mames, eso. ¿O son muchos? ¿O es como una gigante?
¿Ven? Como les dije, no sé qué es. Yo creo que es un ovni.
In the hands of the other station.